We're sitting on a time bomb right now. America is going deeper and deeper and deeper into debt, and it scares me.
I'm looking at a Daily Mail article here. Financial guru who predicted crash of 2008 issues devastating take on U.S. economy. Why is it that now people are waking up to your message, would you say?
You don't have to be an economist to know you're getting screwed. Everybody knows something's wrong. Every time you print fake money, the rich get richer, but the poor middle class get poorer. But our schools don't teach this stuff. That's the problem.
You said this to me once. The difference between a rich person and a poor person is their relationship with fear. That's heavy.
We have four intelligences: mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. But for most people, when it comes to money, it's all fear-based thinking. Fear stops most people from going for their dreams, and it limits them. What if I make a mistake? What if I do this? My rich dad just taught me make a mistake and learn from it. But many people make no mistakes and learn nothing. And there's a lot of those today.
Are you just still out there trying to educate the masses? You seems like you're going to every single continent. Why are you still doing it?
I believe we all have a calling. There's many ways you can make money, but how do I best serve my fellow human being or my country? That's why I went to Vietnam, although I didn't have to go. We're forgetting the essence of service versus money. So I go and teach as long as somebody wants me to teach.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Robert Kiyosaki, the entrepreneur, investor, financial expert, and author of the globally renowned bestseller, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the #1 personal finance book of all time. I love saying that. Robert, you have dedicated your life to challenging the way tens of millions of people around the world think about money and investing. You've written over 30 books, including one with President Donald Trump. You've sold more than 40 million copies of your books worldwide and built a global movement dedicated to helping people protect their wealth. In your book, Rich Dad's Prophecy, you warned that the biggest financial crash in history was on its way. You now believe that crash has begun, that hyperinflation is here, and that millions of people are about to be wiped out financially. You have said there's still time to prepare and urge people to move out of stocks, bonds, and fiat currency and into real assets like gold, silver, and Bitcoin. You believe gold could reach $30,000 an ounce and Bitcoin could go to $1 million in the next 10 years. You've warned that the Fed and the Treasury are running a criminal enterprise by printing worthless money to cover up a collapsing system. Your message is simple, Robert. Get educated, get real assets, and get out of the system before it's too late. Robert, welcome back to London Real.
Brian, how many years have we been talking about this? I mean, 30-something years now.
Yeah,
And
30-some years.
It's here.
Yeah, you have been the OG of predicting this, and you've been talking about this stuff on London Real for 10 years on top of that. You know, I'm looking at a Daily Mail article here that's watched by tens of millions of people around the world, maybe more, hundreds. And it says financial guru who predicted crash of 2008 issues devastating take on U.S. economy. And of course, they're talking about you. Robert, you're getting tons of global traction lately. Why is it that now people are waking up to your message, would you say?
Well, I think was Jim Rickards who said, you don't have to be an economist to know you're getting screwed. You know, something along those lines. If you don't have to go to, Harvard for an MBA in economics, you know something's wrong. Everybody knows something's wrong. And the thing that's terrifying to me, not terrifying, but disheartening, is the gap between rich and poor. That was our greatest fear of. And as you and I know, every time you print this fake money, the rich get richer, but the poor middle class get poorer. And because when you print fake money, assets go up. But when you print fake money, chicken, eggs, and milk go up.
Yeah.
And so the middle class is getting wiped out. Unemployment's climbing. And I'm getting richer. You're getting richer. And I'd rather have everybody get richer. But our schools don't teach this stuff. That's the problem.
Yeah. No, I think people are starting to feel that something's going on out there, like you said. And you referenced our good friend Jim Rickards. I still remember the time we spent together in Phoenix, I think back in 17. where you and I also recorded that epic interview that went viral. And yeah, Jim says it so well, and you say it so well. You know, I saw an article in the FT today, Robert, that said the prices of gold in Iran are like 80% higher than the rest of the world because they're in this closed system. And even the people there realize their own cash is trash and they're pushing gold up even higher than the spot levels elsewhere. It looks like everybody's starting to realize what you've been talking about for decades.
Right. And then this, there's been so many books, and this, I've been a student of this. This is the creature from Jekyll Island.
Yeah.
It's about the Federal Reserve Bank. And there was a line that I think President Jefferson said, if a central bank takes over America, children will wake up homeless in the land their fathers captured. And so homelessness is spreading all across the world, as you know. And it's pretty disturbing to me personally. I've been homeless for about 2 weeks. I didn't enjoy it, but it was in San Diego, so it wasn't so bad. My wife and I lived in our car for about 2 weeks till we found something we could live in. But this affordability, as you know, is wiping people out left and right. They lose their jobs. They can't recover. So it's tragic. It's a tragedy.
You know, it's interesting, Robert, that the public just seems to be much more aware of what's going on. And maybe it's because of what Elon Musk was doing with Doge and the fact that Trump talks about this publicly, or the fact that we keep getting repeated back these trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. It just seems like the public's much more aware of kind of what's going on, and they seem to linking it back to their own savings. And I don't know, it just feels like we're on the edge of a real kind of revolution in that sense. Are you feeling that too?
Yes, and I'm going to give credit to the younger generation because they're more, tech savvy, and they're the ones who got into Bitcoin early. And they got into Bitcoin early because, my generation, the boomer generation, is sound asleep at the wheel. But the younger generation knows what's going on. That's why Bitcoin took off. And so they're aware that, think about this. Our interest payment on our $36 trillion is greater than the income we collect from taxes. I'll say it again. The interest payments on our $36 trillion is greater than the income we collect from taxes. So America is going deeper and deeper and deeper into debt. And as you know, being in your field, derivatives are even a bigger problem. I think derivatives are a quadrillion dollar problem. And we're sitting on a time bomb right now. And it scares me. I mean, I feel for the people not prepared for it.
Obviously, the Trump administration with Doge and a bunch of things, and, Howard Lutnick have really talked about trying to get this under control. But it's really hard for any government to ever get fiat spending under control, whether you're Democrat or Republican. I mean, the history of humanity, Robert, is that ultimately we don't have the discipline, and we ultimately find our bankers printing money until the system collapses. So is there even anything that Trump can do about this, or is it just bigger? Is it the flawed fiat system itself?
Well, as you know, the off-balance sheet debt, when you take Social Security, Medicare in America, pensions and all this, it's $250 trillion. And then when you look at the last war we fought, in the World War II, Germany's in trouble, Japan's in trouble, America's in trouble. So the whole world's in trouble, and China is in serious trouble. So this is, I'm afraid they're just going to print more money. That's not going to solve the problem, just make it worse. But like every time they print this stuff, like I say, guys with assets get richer. Like if you have gold and you print this, gold goes up. But if you're trying to buy a carton of eggs go up too.
Yeah.
And then people can't eat.
Yeah.
So it goes up. It's a tragedy.
So the U.S. is printing, the Eurozone is printing, China's printing, everyone's going to print. And so if someone's listening to us right now and wants to get out of the matrix, Robert, what's the best thing they can do? How can they start?
Well, that's why I've always recommended go to gold and silver, and there's Bitcoin, but there's also commodities like oil. I invest in oil wells. I was an oil man before. And, I took this gold mine public. It's a Trixie mine in Utah.
Oh yeah, I remember you told me about that. Yeah, amazing.
And so I've been, the best solution is preparation. But for people today, if you've lost your job and you can't afford to eat, you can't put a roof over your head, it's hard to say save gold, silver, Bitcoin. You know what I mean? It's a little late. So I'm extremely concerned, but you and I have been talking about this for 30 years now. And some people actioned, some people didn't.
Robert, should people try to hold their politicians accountable? You know, I mean, we've seen people criticizing this kind of big, beautiful bill and saying there's still too much spending in there. We're still going to go down a bad path. Obviously, when Biden was in, he just kept printing at post-COVID levels. It's just this unimaginable amount of money that they were spending for God knows what. Is it worth people trying to rein in the politicians as a temporary fix?
I don't think it's fixable.
Yeah.
I hate to be so pessimistic, and I don't see how you can fix $36 trillion of debt. $1 trillion, if you spend $1 a minute, how long would it take you to spend $36 trillion? It would take you 32,666 years to spend $1 trillion. And they print it in a second. They keep printing money to pay our bills. You think about that, you go, I think you should stop printing your money, but they can't now. Do you know what I mean? They just can't.
Yeah. It's almost like a drug. And I remember one of your books that you said, for the average individual, a paycheck is like a drug because you get so used to being fed kind of by the system, and you don't have to be creative. You don't have to be an entrepreneur. You don't actually create your wealth. And you get so used to someone paying that paycheck. It's like one step different than getting a welfare check, but it's still, something you just get really conditioned to without having to create that wealth. You've always talked about entrepreneurship and creating value. And that's something you've been talking about for 30 years.
Yeah. Is that, don't need a job, basically.
Yeah.
An entrepreneur.
And that's something your rich dad drilled into you in what would look like a very cruel way. By the way, I tell everyone I meet, Robert, and by the way, people around the world love you. And I talk to people everywhere. I was in Dubai, I was in Toronto recently, and whenever I bring your name up, everybody their eyes they just glaze over and just love. And I always tell them, go back and reread Rich Dad Poor Dad. The first 20 pages will blow your mind. You think you know that book, reread it. And I just still remember how your rich dad, in a forceful way, forced you to find a way to get creative and create your wealth. And in a way where you were just almost getting frustrated because you grew up in this system where nobody had to do that. Everybody got a check.
There's another book out I'm endorsing. It's called The Big Print by Lawrence Lepard.
Okay.
I highly recommend this book because it's not that it does anybody any good, but it explains how he got into this mess here. And he talks about the bankers, the city of London and Wall Street and the big bailout. They bail out the rich, which was criminal, at the expense of the poor and middle class. So our value system is corrupt at the core. At the core, when we screw our people to protect the rich. And our school systems, as you know, I love this guy here, the Donald, my book with him, Midas Touch.
Yeah, amazing.
Going after Harvard University, I went, yes, Donald, go get him. He's shutting down the Department of Education. Yes, Donald, go get him. So
now, how do you feel? How do you feel about that, Robert? Because your poor dad was high level in the education system in Hawaii, and you've always had a beef with teachers' unions and people in higher education. Tell me why you've always had that beef, and tell me what you think of what Donald's doing. By the way, did you ever think he would be able to take such big actions so fast against such a high-level institution as Harvard?
He's got guts, and people hate him. But I say, could you imagine if Kamala won?
Oh my God.
Well, that looked like, oh my God, So what I say to people, history will judge his actions today, not you or I. History would be the judge. And I give him a lot of credit. I have a picture of him with his patch on his ear. And the day before he had been shot, and he never watching TV in Milwaukee, at the Republican National Convention. And he and I were talking because I flew these little helicopters in Vietnam, there it goes.
Yeah.
Well, and we got shot at all the time. And it's an interesting sound. He goes, zip, zip. And Brian, that zip had been just a little bit more this way, you'd be dead. And Trump was sitting there with his patch on his ear. How he's alive is beyond me. So we're talking about what it's like to have this zip go past you. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And people were coming up to him and says, Donald, you're the Messiah. You've been saved. I'm not going to go that far, but I'm glad he's alive.
Me too. It's still hard to believe he's still alive. It's just, and it's hard to even imagine what the world would look like if he wasn't, I can't imagine it, Robert. I don't know if I ever told you, but I got down on my knees and prayed the night before the election. I don't think I've ever done that in my entire life. There I was in my place in London on my knees praying for his victory. And I don't know what that says. I just knew it was such an important time, Robert, that I couldn't imagine that future without him.
I agree 100%. And then there was the Biden crime family. But a lot of people point back to Obama, which was the start of it. So it's kind of interesting. I'm not Republican or Democrat. I do my best to stay neutral. But it does seem like the Democrats have been one big crime family. So anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of those allegations coming out. I'm sure we're going to know more. Just wanted to finish up with Harvard. Why is Donald going after these institutions of education? You yourself were censored by some universities in Arizona when you tried to give a talk. We saw so many instances of all the wokeism and all the things going on. Why is it important that Donald's making a stand there?
Well, if you read the Communist Manifesto by Marx, in there, he spelled it all out. And what happened was, what Marx predicted was that communism will infiltrate America through the education system. So in 1930, Columbia University, which is an Ivy League school, sent away to Germany, Berlin, and they sent over Marxist professors to teach at Columbia University's College of Education, Teachers College.
How do you get out of a rat race? How do you create wealth not only for yourself, but also for the generations to come after?
I am absolutely amazed with the quality of companies that we're getting exposure to.
We go on to Zoom calls with the innovators and the folks who are building new applications in metaverse, blockchain, artificial intelligence, decentralized finance.
What's going on, everybody? Thumbs up if you can see me.
We are focusing on early stage investment.
And the quality of people that we're getting exposure to, whether it be Dan Tapiero with 1RT, Jason Ma from Open, Yatsu from Animoca.
It's been a phenomenal experience thus far. It has far exceeded my expectations.
We are focusing on cutting edge technologies.
I view it now as the best investment I've ever made. The upside I view is unlimited.
And as a retail investor, I would never get this exposure anywhere else outside of Investment Club.
See you in the Investment Club.
And that was in 1930. Then you and I remember what happened in the 60s. There was Kent State and all this was the rioting on campuses. So Marxism came in through our school system. I was teaching at Arizona State University, which is one of the biggest schools in America. And the woke professors came after me because I was teaching capitalism.
Wow.
They came after me. I went, wow.
Wow.
So it's our institutions of higher education. So when Donald takes them on, man, I feel he's got so, Mexicans say cojones, big ones. He has got he does not take any BS. And I wrote 2 books with him. He is a great man. His sons are great people as compared to Hunter Biden.
Yeah. I know you know Don and Eric, and you've been hunting with them. You've known them for a long time, and you've always said great things about them. We definitely see them coming into their own. When I was in Toronto at the Consensus Conference, I saw Eric speak, and they're both very good, and they're both very big into crypto and DeFi. And it's interesting. They get questioned about it a lot because they're getting accused that the pro-crypto legislation by the government is in their interests. But they come out and say, look, you know, the reason we love crypto is because we got debanked in 2020 because of our views and our politics and who our dad was. This is by necessity. This isn't, you know, because we all of a sudden wanted to change our business model. As they said, they used to be able to pick up the phone and get a loan from any bank in the world because they were the Trumps. And then the next day they couldn't get a loan from anyone. And so, yeah, it's great to see that family really pushing forward. And, you know, we're big into crypto here, and it's just so refreshing to see that family out there speaking intelligent about the blockchain and assets like Bitcoin, which we all know is going to help everybody through what you're calling a greater depression, which is upon us.
Well, this book here, The Big Print, I highly recommend. The opening, Brian, the opening pages, your blood boils. He talks about Larry Summers and Geithner and all these characters, and how they basically screwed the entire American public to bail out their friends. You know, man, there's something morally rotten. And so the big print is getting at the big print hasn't come yet. So that's why yesterday I was out buying more silver. You know, silver's about $35, and I think next stop is 50. At least I'm hoping it is. But when they print money, assets go up, but so does chicken, milk, and eggs goes up, inflation. And that's why it's wiping out a poor middle class the more they print this stuff. But they don't tell you that in school. It's tragic.
What do you think this one's going to look like, Robert? You've coined it a greater depression as opposed to the Great Depression. And you've talked about what you see out there, which is record high credit card debt, 1.2 trillion. You've talked about obviously the rising national debt, 36 trillion. You talked about increasing unemployment rates, declining 401k balances. How bad is this one going to get?
Well, I've had the benefit, Brian, of this here is a Zimbabwe note. It's $10 million. And this here's a book by a guy, Philip Haslam, When Money Destroys Nations. So guess where I was when Zimbabwe crashed? I was in Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Brian, it was terrifying. It was terrifying.
What's it like? Is it just chaos?
It's panic. They don't know what's real. You know,
Yeah.
Nobody would do this stuff. And the economy is crashing. And I was sitting in a truck. I'm a hunter, you know, in Africa. And they call them the war vets, with these black guys with AK-47s pull up. And they point the guns at me. I'm going, holy mackerel. I didn't die in Vietnam. I'm going to die out here in Zimbabwe, you know. But what they did, Brian, was they went to the white farmers and they took their farm. And this was, I was there, you know, I was watching it going, why? I'm not really religious, but why does God want me to see this? Why am I here watching this? And they point these guns at me and all this. I'm going, wow. All you can do is put your hands up, you know, going, I'm not going to resist. And then so this little white woman comes running out, and they're hauling her off in the car. And she turns to my professional hunter and me, the white guy too. She says, burn this place down. Gentlemen, burn it down. So Brian, we got torches, and they had all these grass shacks and the farmhouse, and then the tractor yard and the diesel fuel. We torched the whole thing. It was blowing up. I thought I was back in Vietnam again.
Wow.
You know, just blowing up, fires going everywhere, and we're hauling our butts out of there. But she just said, burn this place down. I don't want to have anything. But I saw it. I'm going, wow. So why did I see that? Why was I seeing this to Trump the day after he gets shot? You know, why am I seeing this? So, how do I meet you 30 years ago? We keep talking about the same thing, but now it's here.
I think that was a small glimpse into what could be coming to the Western nations like America, Europe, etc.
Sorry to hear when I see the homelessness. It's like Jefferson said it,
Yeah.
when we have a central bank, homelessness will spread. How he was so, prescient. This is Thomas Jefferson.
I heard that quote recently, Robert. And yeah, he said, when you allow the bankers to have control, then sooner or later, you're going to lose your homes, you're going to lose your this, you're going to lose everything. And this was something he said, yeah. And it sounds like a quote that came from someone 10 years ago, but it was 250 years ago. Yeah.
Nobody looked.
The homelessness is something, yeah, that it's just, I know in America and other places, people just grown accustomed to it. But if you come from a Dubai where there's zero, because it's illegal, and then you go to America, it's something you notice right away, and it's kind of shocking. But then you go accustomed to it if you've been there for a long time, as if it's normal. But it wasn't normal 30, 40, 50 years ago, was it?
I look at San Francisco, one of the most beautiful cities in America, and then people don't go there anymore because there's human feces all over the place. What happened? And I think what this guy is here, Lepard is saying here, is when you have bad money, when you have fake money come into a system. That's Gresham's law. Do you know what I mean? When bad money enters the system, good money goes into hiding. So for years, United saying buy gold, silver, Bitcoin. This is my gold mine here. So I'm getting rich. I own oil wells. I own cattle. I own commodities, things like this. But I stay away from paper. I just don't trust them.
Robert, for the average person out there, I know you said if someone's really struggling, it's hard to set aside anything to buy an asset. But if someone was, and probably it'd be a great education for them, even if they spent $20 a month or $50 a month just to start changing their mentality, what should they buy? I know when you came out with your original board game, which is behind you, Cash Flow, by the way, for everybody out there, you should get this board game. They also have one for kids that I play with my kids here in London. And I'm starting to, train their brains the correct way to understand assets and liabilities. It's amazing. But in the original days, you were talking about owning real estate. Now you're talking about owning gold. You just mentioned that you think silver is one of the best opportunities right now because you think it's still relatively low to where it should be. And then, of course, you've been talking about buying Bitcoin and then even Ethereum in the past because you like those as assets. Where do you think people should start on that spectrum? Because it's hard for some people to own real estate with tiny amounts of money, right?
Brian, I get into fights because I have one friend with 4 daughters. And I said, have you read my book? He goes, no. I said, who's teaching your kids about money? School.
Oh.
He doesn't care, Brian. He's an intelligent guy. He's very smart. But he has kind of a block against money. So that I tried to give him a Communist Manifesto, which I had to read at 19. I read the Communist Manifesto. And, it says graduated income tax is essential for the spread of communism, abolition of private property. I mean, what else can you have? Oh, workers of the world unite, labor unions, everything my poor dad loved. Marx endorsed. So it was tough. I was 19 years old and went to school in New York. And then I realized my family are Marxists. Not that they're bad people. Economics is like a religion. Like, there's Jews, Christianity, Buddhism, and all this. So Marxism is an economic religion, same as capitalism is. But as you and I know, in Northern Ireland, you had Catholics shooting Protestants, which made no sense to me at all. I thought we're all on the same side. No, they're Catholics. Oh, they're Christian. They're Protestants. What is wrong with people? I was dating a girl in New York, and the side of her car was IRA, Irish Republican Army. I'm going, I said, how can you hate Catholics? No, they do. Do you know what I mean? I just don't understand people, I'm saying.
And so Marxism versus capitalism, it's sometimes just as vehement and violent as religion versus religion. And people kind of pick these mindsets. And then these days, it's Trump, anti-Trump with the derangement syndrome, right? Those are also lines that people divide. But they really don't know what they're signing up to. And then, of course, the universities, to bring it back to Harvard, they pump and promote these belief systems. I don't know why. Well, it's probably because they were infected via the manifesto, like you said. It's the way they control those student bodies. My daughter's in school in Boston, and, you know, she's getting a special type of brainwashing there as well. And then we saw with the protests that basic human rights went out the window, you know, when those Gaza protests happened. And even my alma mater, MIT, was hauled up in front of Congress, and I was embarrassed to see the president of MIT. This is a school with the greatest technical minds in the world. It is not a school where we should be having people feel uncomfortable because of their religions. And yet that's exactly what was happening, and they were violating basic human rights. So I'm so glad to see Trump attacking that. But I think it all comes down to, like you said, that Communist Manifesto, which said it'll happen through the university systems. And it did, right?
Yep. 4 dead in Ohio was Kent State, and the National Guard shot students. You know, they couldn't get much lower than that. And when I came back from Vietnam, I got spit on, hit with rotten eggs, and, you know, called baby killer and all this. And I landed in just north of San Francisco at Norton Air Force Base, and we got off, and these hippies were out there from the Woodstock generation spitting on us. And geez, I make a joke of it because most of my friends are Republicans. And I say, I swear to God, I saw Nancy Pelosi out there.
Yeah, Robert, I don't think we can imagine what that felt like. I actually saw this interview on YouTube a couple days ago of a Vietnam vet who came back and then ended up working as a police officer right at the Haight-Ashbury precinct. And he was talking about what it was like to be around those hippies. And man, it did not sound like a walk in the park, man. They had barbed wire fence up 15, 20 feet. It was like they were walking around with guns. And he said it was like I was in Nam trying to deal with these people. So I don't even think we understand how hard it was for you to come back from one war zone to another one where people weren't even acknowledging your service back then. So, yeah, I just want to thank you for your service, because having to deal with that is just hard to believe in a world now where at least most people know to thank people for their service, you know?
Well, that's why I commend you and me, because we fight back as teachers. You know, we're capitalists, and we teach capitalism. And I think that's the way we fight back. Because otherwise you have Marxists teaching our kids, you know, like they believe in taxation. And I keep saying to them, America was founded as a tax-free nation called the Boston Tea Party. Remember that?
Yeah.
You have to pay taxes. We're on as a tax-free nation. Marx says a graduated income tax is essential for the spread of communism. I mean, can't they just read that little book? You know, he's in 1930 when Columbia University imported those Marxist teachers from Germany. So you look at what's happening right now. Germany, America, and Japan, we're fighting. And Germany is in trouble. Japan's in serious trouble. America's in serious trouble. China's in trouble. You know, Volkswagen just laid off, I don't know how many tens of thousands of people in Germany. And a big problem with Germany, I'm sure you've heard this, but was they went green. They didn't want to go nuclear, so they went green. And the cost of energy went so high in Germany, they can't afford to produce. So this green movement just keeps spreading its nasty tentacles all the way across the world. And it's all done in the name of DEI, you know, diversity, exclusivity, and all that stuff. I say it should be DIE, die, or dying.
Yeah, it's just another mind virus they kind of use to control that has no base in reality. And Robert, here in the UK, it's just getting worse. You know, we've got a Labour government that are increasing the taxes on foreign nationals that were here. They all bugged out a couple months ago because the UK was trying to tax their assets overseas. So people that have lived here 20, 30 years wealthy people that invest, entrepreneurs are leaving en masse. They're going to a place like Dubai where the taxes are zero, where they have all these upsides like safety. And, I know a woman in Dubai who spends time there and here, and she says, Brian, I wouldn't mind paying 30, 40% tax if I showed up to London and it was safe. There was a police force. There was healthcare. It was clean, but you don't even get that. And then you go to a place like Dubai with zero tax, and it is, I think, literally the safest city in the world. There is no graffiti. There's no homelessness. It's just there to actually help you be an entrepreneur. And I look at the UK and Europe, and I don't know how they're going to reverse it, and the discussions here are crazy. There's a guy here who I think used to be a trader named Gary. He has a show called Gary's Economics, and he just keeps preaching that we got to tax the rich, and that's the only way to save the people here. And no one's taking any ownership, and it just feels like Marxism is back and alive, and the UK is running out of talent, and it's just gonna end poorly, Robert. I'm sure you see some of that from overseas, not to mention the fact that people get arrested for Facebook posts. So it's kind of sad days here.
No, and I was just in Japan. That was just tragic, because they're hardworking, but they save money, and they save
right.
And when they should be investing, they're savers. And then my first gold mine was in China, and I took it public on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And as soon as we struck gold, the Chinese nationalized it.
Yeah.
So I found out what the word country risk means, So you don't do business in countries that don't respect the rule of law, and that's China. Nothing in the Chinese people. But you've got to be more, I think, global, who respects the law, who doesn't. And this was the worst thing about it. It was when they took my gold mine in China, it was in Dalian, China. And the guys called me up, secretly, said, for $1 million, they'll get your mine back. And I thought about it, Brian, I thought about it because it was a big, big mine. But then I realized, if I do that once, when does it end? When does the paying end,
Yeah.
I said, I'll just eat it now. Walked away.
Wow. Yeah, you've told me that story. I listen to a lot of Steve Bannon lately. He's got his War Room podcast, and Rickards goes on there sometimes. And I think people don't really understand Steve Bannon very well. But if you listen to him talk about China, it's fascinating the way that he characterizes it. Because he says, there's not 1.3 billion communists in China. He said, there's 1,000 gangsters in the CCP, and they don't even care about communism. They're gangsters, and they're the same guys that took away your mine and that run that country into the ground. But the people of China are probably more capitalistic than any place. Again, hardworking people, but it's all run by the gangsters at the top. And I never heard anyone articulate that like Bannon has. And I think he's on to something there. That's it.
This is the book, Buckminster Fuller, called The Grunge of Giants. And that's what this guy is saying too. We have gangsters in our banking system.
Yeah. Yeah. Same thing. Right? Yeah. Different.
They don't care. People, they really don't care. They don't care, just that they get rich.
Robert, you mentioned that schools teach us to be poor. It's one of your quotes that I quote all the time. Do you see us making any changes to that schooling institution right now? Obviously, Trump's going after Harvard. That's kind of high level. Do you think with the advent of AI or these personal tutors that maybe we can at some point start teaching our kids about money?
I think the social media is going to teach our kids. That's what I was saying. Many times I find the younger guys more savvy than the older guys in my generation.
Okay.
Because they're more tuned in to YouTube and things. Not that it's, but they get more up-to-date news. Not that all of it's good, but they're more tuned into social media than, Channel 9 or 10, stuff like that, or CBS. So it's really changing. The world's changing very, very quickly, and so is the younger kids. But as you know, like Japan's going to be out of people pretty soon too.
Yeah, tell me about Japan, because as you said, they're almost religious about their saving. And in Japan, having an idea outside of the norm is discouraged. So everybody kind of goes along. And I would argue, from what I've seen, they're probably the worst of the G7 when it comes to this just constantly saving without ever asking themselves why. The government buys all of their really low coupon bonds, and they're always in this state, the same state they've been in for 10 years, right? Massive debt, economy at a standstill. What did you see when you went there?
Well, I think they entered a depression in 1990.
Wow.
And, well, you know, the carry trade, they were printing all this money and people were borrowing in yen, buying dollars. And so the bond market is in serious. I was going to ask you about that because I see the biggest problem in the world today is the bond market, not the stock market, because the stock market's big, but in my opinion, the bond market's 10 times bigger and deeper.
Yeah.
And when the Chinese and Japanese and people start dumping our bonds to buy gold, what is that? What's that going to the U.S. dollar? What do you know about the bond market and as far as them dumping our U.S. bonds?
Yeah, well, everybody's watching that 10-year note and that 30-year note kind of creep up. It was kind of going one way when the original tariff negotiations happened, and everyone thought, you know, they could refinance the 10-year note at 4%, but now it's going the other way, and people are very concerned about what's going on. So I think you're right, Robert. I think we really have to worry about what's going on with those bonds. Of course, everyone thinks that maybe, you know, the stable coins in crypto could be a new buyer of those treasury assets, but that's probably only a temporary fix to the structural problem.
But the problem, Brian, is what happens to the people. You and I are okay. And, you know, you and I work for the people. It disturbs me. It really disturbs me. And then, you know, it's the uninformed, or maybe they don't care. Or I got into it with this guy with 4 daughters, and he says, so what? I said, who's going to teach your daughters if you don't teach them? He says, school. I mean, I'm going. And he knows nothing. So if I had kids, I'd be terrified. You know, what do I teach my kids today?
Yeah,
but that's you and I have been on that one for a long time.
Yeah. And look, for me, it's important because my first son, Caden, just turned 9 and his brother is about to turn 8. And so we're starting to have these conversations and they ask questions. Obviously, they play cash flow game, which is great. But they also own Bitcoin, both of them. And I'm using this digital asset, something they're familiar with because they play video games. I always joke my 7-year-old kid has more digital assets than Michael Saylor. I mean, he's got, you know, and he trades them and he's really comfortable. So if they can own some Bitcoin, Robert, and they can watch the price continuing to go up, as it has, just hit an all-time high a week or two ago at 112. A lot of people are predicting 125, 150, 180K, 200K, even this year. If they can watch that go up and understand structurally that there's 2 things going on, not only is Bitcoin becoming more valuable, but the dollar is becoming less valuable. And if they can start to see that, I think it's maybe one of the quickest ways people can learn about what you're talking about, Robert. And maybe that's one of the reasons you were attracted to Bitcoin early on. You were a very early adopter that shocked a lot of people, Robert.
Well, this guy, Buckminster Fuller, he was a futurist.
Yeah.
He built the geodesic domes and all this stuff. And he predicted Bitcoin years ago.
Wow.
He was watching kids play video games and he saw the score. And he says, that's the future of money. I mean, he was so prescient, so far ahead of his time. I still remember saying, that's the future of money. It's called blockchain.
Wow. Wow.
So he was way ahead of his time. So I just kind of tagged along with his, you know, test. It's speculative, but I'm glad I bought some, you know.
You know, I know an incredible macro investor and a big investor in Bitcoin. His name is Dan Tapiero. You would love him. I'll introduce you to him one day. And he goes around the world trying to explain blockchain and Bitcoin to the average person, including traditional investors, because he's run multi-billion-dollar funds and a lot of times he's got pension funds that give him money. And he said, Brian, the single biggest determinant of who can understand Bitcoin, it's not the university they went to, it's not how much money they have, it's not the connections, it's their age. And he said, if they're over 50, they struggle. If they're under 50, they have a chance. If they're under 30, they really can get it. And that's why I think everyone was blown away when you came out, Robert, and said, yeah, I see Bitcoin. I get it. I'm going in. And you said this 3, 4, 5 years ago. And you were the only guy who's been around that was doing that. And all the other folks, you know, the Buffetts and the Mungers were calling it rat poison. And yet you really understood it right away. Is that because you saw it as a real asset, or also because of Buckminster Fuller kind of gave you that heads up?
It was kind of Bucky.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It was, I had to just trust it. But even now, you know, I entered at 6,000.
Okay.
And no matter what you enter at, you go, I should have bought more.
Yeah, so many people, they don't buy, Robert, because they think they're buying too high, when they don't realize that based on everything that Robert Kiyosaki has been telling us for 30 years, is it's going up by definition because it's priced currently in fiat. Sometime in the future, we won't even quote Bitcoin in fiat because the number will be like the Zimbabwe dollars, right? We'll just call it a Bitcoin because it'll be more maybe the monetary system. But right now, you shouldn't worry that 100K is too high. Michael Saylor says it's going to 13 million each by the time in 15 years. So yeah, you're right, Robert. People should get some now. And you can buy $50 of Bitcoin easy. You can buy $100 of Bitcoin. And I think if anybody is feeling like they've missed the boat, or they're one of these people Robert's talking about that struggles with basic goods, buying a little bit of crypto or Bitcoin, I think is a good start to just start educating yourself about asset ownership.
Yeah, and it's just like I went down to the coin dealer yesterday and I bought, you know, a silver eagle, and it was $34. But I think you and I remember when it was 50 and the Hunt brothers tried to corner the market on silver. So silver is still 60% below its all-time high, and gold went to all-time high, and Bitcoin's going to all-time high. So I've been telling people that silver is the biggest bargain of all right now. But they go, well, how's it going to make me rich? I said, it doesn't make you rich. It just keeps your wealth.
Yeah, it holds your wealth for you. Yeah.
You know.
One thing I found interesting, the Bitcoin conference was last week in Vegas. And it's wild, Robert, because you see these young kids get on stage, people that have been on my show, like Dylan LeClaire, who actually runs a Bitcoin treasury strategy for a Japanese company called MetaPlanet. And since they've been buying Bitcoin, their stock is up like 7x. Obviously, Michael Saylor spoke, but he's a little older. A woman named Lynn Alden spoke as well. And Robert, they give these most incredibly detailed presentations about what you're talking about how there's too much money being printed and it's never going to be reversed. And it's just so beautiful to see these young people up there that have really educated themselves and are now telling the world exactly what's wrong with our monetary system. But they're able to do that, Robert, probably because they read your books, and also because they look at it through the lens of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin's a beautiful thing because it's just this real asset that everyone can kind of anchor it to, compare to, look through the lens. And some of these presentations, if you see them, you would be blown away. I think you'd be really proud because these people have actually educated themselves outside of the school system and they get it. And young people like to learn from young people. And when they see a 25-year-old kid on the stage or a 30-year-old explaining this, I don't know, I feel like we're already on our way, Robert.
Yeah. It's our generation, the boomer generation, that is, you know, they're still hanging on to their 401k and the 60-40, 60% equities, 40% bonds. And I'm watching this bond market collapse. And if the bond market keeps collapsing, it's going to take some banks with them. So there are a lot of banks in trouble right now. So that was what, 2023, you know, Silicon Valley Bank went down and all that. And it was a Credit Suisse. Well, anyway, the Swiss bank went.
Yeah, I think Credit Suisse was faltering. The Silicon Valley Bank was shocking and scary when that happened. And that was real close. I mean, they went in and bailed that thing out. Wasn't obvious they were going to bail it out. I still remember that Sunday night. And that had all the Silicon Valley money there. Would have caused some serious disruptions. Yeah, there's some scary times ahead. Robert, when you look at artificial intelligence, how do you feel about it? Do you think this changes anything in the economy? Does it change things going forward? I'm just kind of curious what your take on it is.
Well, again, I listen to the younger guys. I went to this conference, and this kid is like 25 years old, and he did the best explanation of AI I've ever heard. But it was completely over my head. But Rickards wrote this book here, Money GPT.
Yeah. It's great.
I devoured this book. I still don't understand it, but it's how AI is going to bring down the banking system.
Yeah.
According to
I had Rickards on to talk about that book. He's one of our great mutual friends, a big fan, amazing man. But I think the thesis of that book is that artificial intelligence is going to magnify some of these trading decisions and make decisions that a human would not make because a human might know better. And like you said, blow up the system quicker because AI is involved than it would if just human traders were there. I think that's roughly the premise.
That's why, I'm an old guy, so I just keep it really simple. I just say buy gold, silver, and just go straight to commodities. I own cattle, I don't kill the cattle. I sell the semen. So they're Wagyu bulls. So there's cash flow and there's sperm flow.
Robert, you always have the most interesting angles. And so, Robert, we were texting back and forth, you and me, the last couple of months, and you're like, Brian, I'm on a world tour, going second time around the world. Like, Robert, what's a few months in your life look like? What are you doing, and why are you still doing it? Are you just still out there trying to educate the masses? You seems like you're going to every single continent. What does it look like to look into your life?
Well, it's called mission. I'm a U.S. Marine, and mission always came first. And our mission is, like you, we're here to serve. There's many ways you can make money, but how do I best serve my fellow human being or my country? And so that's why I went to Vietnam, although I didn't have to go, but I came to serve. I went to Service Academy. So I think we're forgetting the essence of service versus money. So I go and teach as long as somebody wants me to teach. Like I was just in Dubai, and I sat there looking at that place going, oh my God. But, I said, well, that's US dollars coming in via oil money, right? That flows back into Dubai. And so I was sitting at this table and there was these working girls. And I thought, I'm going to watch how these working girls work. Brian, I laughed my ass off. The first thing they do was they got a guy's wrist and went like this. And they checked his watch. They wanted to know what brand he was wearing. And then they opened his collar and his shirt like here. And they wanted to know what brand the shirt was. Well, they weren't going to talk to him. I fell off the table laughing. I mean, even the hookers are into the money.
Everybody's making money in Dubai. That's for sure. Right?
And if you don't have money, they don't want to talk to you.
It's probably just like the oil boom in West Texas back in the day, right? Probably similar characters, maybe dressed up a little bit better with some beaches, right?
I'll tell you one more story. I was, being an entrepreneur, I was always looking for cash myself. I went to Silicon Valley when it was just starting out. And I'm sitting at a bar, in San Jose or someplace. And there's this gorgeous woman sitting next to me. So I'm sitting there talking to her. And I said, so what's your business plan? She says, I'm going to marry 3 rich guys and take their money. I mean, she was crystal in her financial plan. I mean, crystal clear. And she looked at me and says, don't worry. I know you're not rich. I said, why? You have cheap shoes on. The rich men all have expensive shoes.
This is why I love talking to you, Robert, because I always know you're going to hit me with a zinger on this show. So last time you pulled out your 44 Magnum, and this time you're telling me some of the details, which is great. What do you like Dubai? Do you like going there? Do you think it's a great place for entrepreneurs? What are your thoughts of Middle East?
The different, everybody's got to go see that place.
Yeah.
You really have, it's a whole new world, as you know.
Yeah.
and from there I went to Uzbekistan. And that was fascinating because I met the Donald Trump of Uzbekistan. And he just goes, he says, I built all those buildings there. I mean, the power of communism is what I'm getting at. If you're one of these, what do you call them, oligarchs, their power is immense also. So in just traveling, you get to see the world that most people, the average, sitting in Tucson, Arizona, they don't see.
Yeah. And you like doing it because you like to teach, you like to learn. Are you restless? Like if you had to stay at home for a year, would you go crazy, Robert?
When I get a call to teach, that's like, yeah, I'll go teach.
Yeah. You sent me a text. You said 1,800 participants, picture to follow. I mean, I've seen you like fill a room to the brims. People really want to learn, don't they?
And we play the cash flow board game because, as Maria Montessori, the great educational entrepreneur, says, what the hand does, the mind remembers. So by playing the game, it rearranges your neural pathways up here. But if you sit and just listen to a lecture, you don't learn anything. It goes in one ear, out the other. But by having to fill out financial statements and move pieces around the board and all this, your hands and your brain then coordinate to change the neural pathways up here.
Yeah.
So I learned most of it just playing Monopoly, 4 green houses, red hotel. So I owned red hotels all over the place. And I was a kid. I didn't know any better. So.
Yeah. But it planted that seed inside your head and you could use it later. I actually met a woman in Dubai that saw the both of us present in the Excel Center a year and a half ago. And she came up to me and said, Brian, you were on stage with Robert, blah, 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 blah. So it's just amazing. And the other thing about Dubai I like, Robert, is that it attracts people who have an entrepreneurial mindset because everybody goes to Dubai with an intention. Whether you're one of the girls at those tables you mentioned, or you're a taxi driver, or you're a builder, or you're an entrepreneur, or a Bitcoin person, you go there, leave your country because you know you're going to make more money, more opportunities. So everyone there hustles, everyone there moves fast, and it's a refreshing place to be. When I come back to London, I see a bunch of zombies, Robert. But in Dubai, I feel like the energy and it feels like my people. Do you feel that too?
What the London Real Investment Club actually does for you, it gives you the keys to open that door to the inside deals. In the last 3 weeks, I've participated in 3 incredible deals, a layer 2 Bitcoin protocol, an incredible AI protocol. The deal flow is beyond what I expected. I don't think I've ever seen a model like this that just gives average folks the opportunity to be behind the deals. And that's exactly what we've done. Not only that, you get to hang out with Brian Rose every week. And for me, that was huge because I look at Brian as somebody who's not only an expert in the space, and I think is on the leading edge, but just the leading edge of thought with London Real and the work he's doing there. To anyone who's taking a serious look at this, I know it's a big decision. It was a big decision for me and my family, and it is one of the best decisions I've ever made. So I wish you all the best and hope you come join us.
I tell you what, when they open up they want to check your watch and then your collar, they're in there for the money. I loved it. I had such a good time there. But you've got to see it. You know what I mean? You got to see it before. It's the new world right now.
Yeah.
It's
beautiful to know a place like that exists, because if you spent your time in the States and in Europe, and someone said there's this magical place where you can go, where there's 0 taxes, there's no crime, everything's clean, and you can do what people want to do, which is build your business and raise your family how you want to. People will be like, that's impossible. That would never work. What are you talking about? But then when you go there, you realize it is possible. And the people that are there, they're happy to be there. And all you have to do is follow rules. The same rules you would follow if someone invited you over to their house for dinner. Guess what you do? You don't spray paint the place. You don't camp out in their family room. You don't spit their food out. You just treat it with respect. And if you don't want to be in the house anymore, you leave. And that's what I tell people in Dubai. Just treat it as if you're going to someone's house and say, thank you. I appreciate that. And then everything's fine.
And the thing that's interesting about Dubai, there's so much money. Their ideas are bigger. Like, I don't know, did you just see that project, The Trench or something like that?
Oh, I think I've just seen it published. right? It's like,
Yeah, they're digging a trench so big that it'll be a whole ecosystem going across the desert. I'm going,
yeah, it's like a big garden ecosystem or something like that. Yeah.
but their ideas, because they have so much money, their ideas.
They think so big, Robert. Like when I stay in JBR right next to the Palm, and I do my walks in the morning, you know, just to get my mind right in the morning. And I just look around and I'm like, look at the vision here and the execution. It's the most man-made beachfront property in human history, and probably will be for a long time. These guys think big, and it puts the reflection right back to me and saying, well, what are you doing today? You know? So the other thing about Dubai, Robert, is that if you think you're rich in Arizona or California or New York, go to Dubai, because you're nothing in Dubai. I know a guy who has some Bugattis there, and he put a video out the other day when he showed his Bugatti and he showed some other cars, and he said, in Dubai, there's always someone with a bigger one. And so it's very humbling, even if you think you're a successful entrepreneur, because there's people in Dubai that are on a level 10 or 100 times more than you. And if you're the kind of person that's not intimidated by that, that actually is motivated by that, then it's a beautiful place to go, because you're being pushed constantly. How big can you go? How big can you dream?
And that's what happens. Anybody listen to this, if you had $100 billion, you can't say I can't afford it. And then the question would be, what are you going to do? Yeah. And there's no constraint. There's no, we can't afford to do something. Their ideas are so much bigger. People I was talking to, we can do this, we can do that, because there's so much money driving it. So it was refreshing as compared to listening to some other people on, well, you should live below your means, and get your 401k.
Yeah.
60-40. So different.
It's so different, and the government runs it like a business. And if you don't get the job done, they don't slack on deadlines. If you don't get the job done, you get fired. And they're constantly getting customer feedback, which you would think for a government would not be doing that. Compare it to an American government. They run it like a business, and they're serious about those marks. Again, just the opposite of what most governments do.
Going to Dubai took the brakes off of my brain, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I go, can I afford it? Can I afford it? Well, how much does that going to cost me? You don't have those brakes on your brains in Dubai.
Yeah. I quote you all the time, Robert, to my students. And I say, Robert Kiyosaki said to me once, he said, Brian, a poor person says, I can't afford it. A statement closes the mind. You said this to me in our interview in Phoenix. And then you said, a rich person says, how can I afford it? A question opens the mind. And I always tell them, Robert doesn't mean rich on paper. That rich person might have $0 in their account, but they're thinking rich. And the poor person could have $1 million in their account, but they're thinking in a poor manner. And that's one of the many lessons I learned from you, Robert.
And it's even worse than that. A lot of it has to do with your parents. Like most professional athletes, they're millionaires at 25 and bankrupt 10 years later.
Right.
So money doesn't make a poor person rich. Right. If you can understand that one. Wow.
Wow. Yeah. That's heavy. Wow. That's heavy. And that's why I think you get so angry when you talk about your friend that's not educating his 4 daughters, because you know that even with his wealth and all that, that's not going to save them, because they're going to go on their own journeys. And the best way to make them rich is to educate them, right?
Well, who's responsible for your child's education but you?
Yeah.
It's not a rich man, but he doesn't care. I'm going,
yeah,
teaching your kids.
So my other favorite Robert Kiyosaki quote that I tell my students all the time, Robert, is you said this to me once. You said the difference between a rich person and a poor person is their relationship with fear. That's heavy. What do you mean by that, Robert?
Well, we have 4 intelligences, okay? We have mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. So you have mental IQ, physical IQ, spiritual IQ, and emotional IQ. But for most people, when it comes to money, the relationship is with fear. Fear stops most people from going for their dreams, and it limits them. What if I fail? What if I make a mistake? What if I do this? That's all fear-based thinking. versus, and that's why I really didn't like school, because my rich dad just taught me make a mistake and learn from it. But many people make no mistakes and learn nothing. And there's a lot of those today. The gap between rich and poor is so wide today. And I think a lot of people are just afraid of making a mistake, which is a mistake.
Yeah.
So it's fear-based.
Yeah, in school, we get punished for making a mistake. The other thing about school, Robert, I think you told me this, is that we're forced to compete with our classmates, which is the opposite of how people win in the real world. Peter Thiel, famous investor, he has a great book with a title. I love the title of his book, Competition is for Losers. And it's got a little wordplay there. But you've been saying this forever, right? Like in the real world, people collaborate, right?
Like I have a very, very smart team. I have a great accountants, attorneys, real estate guys, systems guys, and they're my team. I couldn't do it by myself. Whereas a student, like a doctor, a lot of times is, I'm going to do it by myself. I'm going to do it by myself. I remember once I was in this bar in Hawaii, and there was this doctor there, and he opened up his little box. He had some rare coin there, like, a numismatic gold coin. And he put it down and he was talking about it. And he opened it up again. The coin was gone. So we're all staying at the bar going, well, I didn't take it. I didn't take it. I didn't take it. And my friend, this guy named Jim, really, really rich guy, he says, don't worry about it. He's a doctor. He feels guilty about the money he makes, so he's going to lose it. I never forgot that. I said, but, you hang out with wise people, if you know what I mean. Like, this guy, I forget his name, Jim something, but he was just brilliant, brilliant entrepreneur. And he had his kind of an eye for everything. About your money, you lose it.
Robert, you mentioned that spiritual intelligence. It's something that I think you're the only one I've heard talk about it. And these days, we've heard about, obviously, just the IQ, the intelligence. We've heard people talking about emotional intelligence these days. Can you read a room and read how people feel? But and physical intelligence, I think we understand that some people really have that gift or that understanding of the physical world in their body. But the spiritual, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, what does God want done? When I was studying with Buckminster Fuller, this guy here, this is 81, I think. And he says, what's your purpose in life, young man? And I said, get rich. He says, it's a waste of a good mind, he says, ask yourself this, what does God want done? Go do that. And I went, it took me a while, but that's where Rich Dad, Poor Dad came out. I said, God wants me to teach what my rich dad taught me. And then Martin Luther King said it also. He said, Martin Luther King says, I just want to do God's will. That's spiritual intelligence. That can you say, well, I would do God's will, but I have to earn a living. That's not spiritual at that point. But that's how I took the whole thing. And, studying with Fuller was just, he says, do what God wants done.
Wow.
And I became a teacher.
Did it take you a while, Robert, to click on what does God want you to do? Because you probably were so fixated on, I want to get rich first. Did it really take you a while to make that adjustment?
It took me a long time, Brian. I was still doing my real estate development and all this, and I love it. I like real estate. I was having a good time. But that haunted me. What does God want done? And one night I was down by on the Mexican border in Bisbee, Arizona. And I'm sitting in a jail. John Wayne owned the jail down there, the old Bisbee jail. And he rented it out. So I'm living in the Bisbee jail. And I'm sitting there at night, and the question kept saying, what does God want done? And one night it just came out and said, I had a rich dad and I had a poor dad. And that's where the book came from.
And you said that to yourself? You just said, I had a rich dad and I had a poor dad. It just came to you.
I was just typing, you know.
Wow. In John Wayne's jail.
Yeah, it's the Bisbee jail, but he owned it. And it was a neat jail, you know, upstairs, downstairs, had a kitchen.
And it came to you and you kind of knew this was kind of God telling you what to do.
It just came through.
Wow. Wow. Man, I always get jealous when you tell me these moments where I wish I was hanging out with you at the bar in Hawaii and the John Wayne jail, Robert, the place in Zimbabwe and in Dubai. But we'll do more of that in the future. You know, I don't know if I ever told you this, Robert, but I was a lot like you in my 20s and 30s. If you asked me what I wanted to do, it was to get as rich as possible. That was something ever since I was a little kid. My brother, not so much. My sister, not so much. Me, that was my focus. And when I got to 40 years old, Robert, after I tried to do that and was reasonably successful in banking, I got to 40 and I looked around and I finally realized that the money wasn't making me happy. In fact, I was alone, no family, drinking myself to death. And I finally clicked in my brain that this is not working. And I quit my job and I started London Real. And that was, I believe,
God's calling.
Yeah. Yeah.
But God.
Yeah. And it took me 40 years because I got a thick head, probably like you, Robert. And, but then once I saw it, because of the same thick head, I just went all in. And even though in the beginning, Robert, it wasn't a business, it wasn't making money, it didn't even make sense to anybody around me, I could tell that my life was improving like tenfold. And I was just happier and I was just, amazing things were happening to me. And I was just in this flow and I had viewers and students and I kept going because of that positive feedback.
Right. So, you know, we can ask our listeners right now, what does God want done? And it's a question worth asking. And it doesn't come, it might come easy, but it didn't come easy for me because being a teacher was the last thing. I hated school. Just hated it.
And you come from a family of teachers and you were suspicious of that, right? So
how do I make money as a teacher? What's the problem?
Well, you figured it out somehow. Do you think when you stop focusing on how to make money and do what God wants you to do, that in a weird way, the money flows on the back of that?
More than ever. But I practice what I teach also. There's a difference. You and I are in this business. There's a lot of people who are preachers, but not teachers.
Yeah.
They tell you what to do. They don't do it themselves. So I made an agreement with myself. Anything I wrote about, I had to have done it first. So there had to be some integrity in the words, which is spiritual, you know. So when I say yesterday I bought silver, I bought silver yesterday, you know, because it hit $35 a coin. So probably going to 70 this year. I love it. It's a game, you know. I love it.
I love it. I'm happy to get some.
When I teach.
I believe when we sat down in Phoenix and had that long discussion, you said, to emphasize, you said, it's not about what you want to do. That doesn't matter. It's what God wants you to do. And almost by definition, that's not going to be what you want to do because you're so focused on you. You're so focused on this myopic world. You're so focused on probably all the nonsense you've been taught. You need to actually tune into what God wants you to do. And in the beginning, it's going to be uncomfortable. Maybe it's not going to make a lot of sense, but that's the path.
That's like Martin Luther King. I just want to do God's will. You know, and that he carried him to great man. So I think that's a calling for all of us. I believe we all have a calling, but we don't always follow it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you don't follow it, your calling will start following you and torturing you, I think. And you'll get, as you get older, because every year you don't take that calling and take action, is a year less you have. And as you go more and more, you'll find, I think, your world kind of shrinking if you're not following that God's path. And hopefully that pushes you to wake up and realize Or people can just listen to us now and start thinking about it. And again, if you have a hang up with the word God, replace that with, all powerful, with energy, with whatever. But I think we all kind of know what that means now, right? The right thing to do, perhaps.
But Fuller called it the Great Spirit.
Ah, okay.
The American Indian called it the Great Spirit.
Yeah.
We're all tuned into that. But it's interesting that I said, well, what does God want done? And then I saw the poverty and all this stuff. And I said, but I'm solving my problem. Maybe I solve everybody else's problem too. So that's why I created the board game.
Wow. I love it. And a lot of people don't know the board game came before the book. And then the book, when it got famous, it sold the board game. Is that right? Wild.
And now the board game is in, the happiest time was this trip. I was in, the board game is now in Arabic.
Ooh.
So it's going into the Muslim world.
Nice.
And that makes me very, very happy, because if we can promote peace and prosperity via education, not warfare. And so I have friends who are Muslim who are teachers, and they go around the world teaching Muslims. That makes me the happiest. The book's now in Arabic, so Rich Dad put it in Arabic, so that's good,
I love
and
it.
that's when the Spirit of God comes through and go, thank you. And there's people just voluntarily want to do it too. I'm not paying them; they just want to do it. They want to teach. So,
Robert, what do the next year look like for you or two? You're always working on some companies. You're always doing something there. Are you going to keep traveling the world? You're going to keep teaching? What's on your horizon?
I think this is my last hard year, and then I'm going to taper back. But, my age is creeping up. I can feel it in my bones.
I don't see it. You look younger than me, Robert, making me look bad.
Well, thank you.
So,
but anyway.
Investment Club. Today, I consider it the best investment that I've ever made. We get 4 projects presented a week by their associated CEOs. Personally, I'm completely blown away by the quality of these projects, and I know of nowhere else where I would be given this same opportunity. Each week that passes, I feel more appreciative of the fact that I'm a member of this group. The vibe was just tremendous. Everybody's on the same wavelength. We just clicked. Everybody listened to each other, enjoyed their company. It was just magical, magical. Take action. Don't take my word for it. Due diligence you need to do. And I really hope that someday down the road I see you in the club. It far exceeded expectations, without question.
I just want to do God's will. It'll come.
okay.
So, it's not for me to decide, Brian, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. All right. But that typically manifests itself in teaching and walking the walk. So building the companies that get you more real assets, right? That's what you do.
I can't help but make assets.
Yeah.
It's automatic to me.
I think you do it in your sleep.
I just sit there and I read spiritual books too, not only finance books. But it says that just follow your calling. What are you supposed to do? And don't fight it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, okay, so that was this morning's lesson. Just keep going, but something else is coming along.
Wow.
Trust that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Robert, I wanted to tell you, I thought about you about 3 weeks ago in Dubai. I had my very first boxing match.
Oh.
And I had been training martial arts for over 20 years, but I'd never actually gone into the ring. And that always used to eat at me. And I'm not getting any younger. I just turned 54. And I decided I was going to jump in with a real boxing match, no headgear. And they shipped in some 28-year-old punk kid from London. They wanted to knock my block off. All right. And at the way, what's that? In Dubai. Yeah. It's actually called Crypto Fight Night. They kind of follow the crypto events around the world. It's become quite popular. And so at the weigh-ins, he comes in and we're facing off and he just pushes me and like tries to attack me. So like he's going crazy on me, Robert. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing? Like, what did I get myself into? And 24 hours before the fight, I started to really, ask myself hard questions like, what am I doing? I went to a dark place. And your quote resonated in my mind. The difference between a rich person and a poor person is their relationship with fear. Now, in this case, rich and poor didn't mean monetary per se, but it meant the kind of life I'm going to live. And I knew that if I could get through this hurdle and show up in that ring, that I would be a richer person somehow. And Robert, you know, it was live stream around the world. My kids are watching, everybody's watching, but I'm going in, and this is the guy that could take out, you know, the mayor of London, Brian Rose, right? This. And he said before, I'm going to take everything away from you. And so I'm leaving my flat that night, Robert, and I'm thinking, am I going to wake up in a hospital? You know, what's going to happen? I don't know. Getting in was probably one of the harder things I ever did. But as soon as that bell rang and a couple of my shots landed, I was like, okay, I got this. And we went 3 hard rounds. It was amazing. But like something changed in me that night. And by going through that fear, I became kind of a rich man somehow. And I was thinking a lot about you. So thank you for that, Robert.
Thank you. That's very stoic. You know what I mean? I'm just going to get through it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, in retrospect, Robert, I'm so glad that he pushed me in the weigh-ins and he dialed it up, because it meant the payout was all the better. And now in the future, when I'm in a fearful situation, I can always go back to this and say, you know what? It's going to play out just like this did. My brain's going to put all these fears in my head. It's going to try to talk me out of doing this and play small, like so many people do with their wealth, right? They play small, they're scared of everything, and they just do whatever they were taught. Or you could push through it and realize that 99% of that is just nonsense. It's a very low probability of happening, and we're only going to learn by taking action. And so now I've got this lesson in my back pocket, and it's going to make me richer, and it's going to make me a better teacher, and it's going to help me impact the world more. So yeah, thanks, Robert.
Congratulations, man. That's stepping into the, anybody ever stepped into that ring, it's a big step.
And now I got the bug. I think I'm going to do a rematch now in October. I want to go back in again because I see this as a growth opportunity. Who knows, Robert? Maybe this is what God wants me to do, you know? Because a lot of people watch that and they get inspired by that. So many people, I'm talking about old ladies as well, were like, Brian, knock him out. And everybody had a position and they were looking at that. And a lot of people came up to me and said, Brian, I'm 40 years old. And if you can do that, what can I do? And it was just amazing. So in a weird way, Robert, maybe that is what God wanted me to do, is just go do that. And the downside, okay, some things could have happened to me, but the upside was so much more. So look, I'm still learning. And yeah, Robert, I just want to say that I really cherish our friendship. And I'm just so glad the world gave us Robert Kiyosaki. And like I said, so many people around the world appreciate you. I think you know that. But I just always want to report back whenever I mention your name, and I mention you in all sorts of circles. Everybody just says, oh, wow. They know who you are, and they have tremendous respect for you because you taught them something. You gave them something that they know is real, just like the assets you tell us to invest in. They know what you tell them is real. It's like you said, Rickard said, you don't need a PhD in finance to know that the book Rich Dad Poor Dad is talking about real, and people get that. Yeah.
So thank you, my friend. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're doing God's will by teaching.
It's so true. It's so true. Robert, I can't wait to see you again. Let's do this in person next time. For people, they should follow you on X, right? That's where you put a lot of your stuff. That's where you post about what you're doing. It's The Real Kiyosaki, right? Yeah.
We just keep going. That's all there is.
I know. And when I see your smile, I'm just going to think about how I can keep going. So yeah, Robert, thanks for putting the word out there. For everybody here, please go out, just buy some real assets. Even if it's a tiny little bit, it'll start you on that path, and go look into a few of these things, and also strap in and be ready for what's coming. So thanks, Robert. I appreciate you. I hope to see you soon as well.